Moving on, tributes this Tuesday in Paris to the victims of the January 2015 terror atrocities, the incidents that have become known in popular opinion as the Charlie Hebdo attacks. It was outside the former offices of that magazine that the ceremony took place this morning, led by President Emmanuel Macron. A high-profile delegation remembered the 12 people who were shot dead. 2 Islamist gunmen entered the premises. They carried out their attack in the editorial offices of the magazine, and they killed a police officer in the street as they fled. Well, here at France 24, Emerald Maxwell looks back at the events that shook France 10 years ago.
These journalists ran to the roof of their building after gunshots ran out from the nearby offices of Charlie Hebdo. 2 men had stepped out of a black Citroën. First, they shot dead Frédéric Boisseau, a building maintenance worker, and then stormed the second floor of Charlie Hebdo's offices during a morning editorial meeting. They killed Charb, the editor-in-chief, as well as cartoonists Wolinski, Tinius, Cabu, 2 other members of staff, and a man who, by unhappy chance, was visiting that day. This in a military-style attack. The assailants managed to escape the first officers who arrived at the scene by opening fire on them. They drove off and ran into 42-year-old policeman Ahmed Merabet patrolling on his bicycle. He tried to stop them, but his pistol was no match for their Kalashnikovs, and he was shot dead. The attackers' shouts could be heard as they escaped. 12 people died that day, and brothers Sherif and Saïd Kouachi, identified by documents left in one of the cars, became the most wanted men in France. Early on Thursday morning, a man later identified as Amdi Koulibaly, close to the Kouachi brothers, opened fire in Montrouge, a suburb south of Paris, killing 27-year-old Clarissa Jean-Philippe, a rookie police officer. Later that day, authorities announced that the Charlie Hebdo suspects had robbed a petrol station 100 kilometers northeast of Paris. 88,000 police officers were deployed to hunt them down. On Friday, the Kouachi brothers dumped their stolen car in the industrial suburb of Dammartin-en-Goële. Pursued by police, they holed up inside a print workshop with the owner and an employee who was hiding. Around 1 p.m, news of another hostage situation emerged. The Montrouge killer had resurfaced. Inside a kosher supermarket in eastern Paris, Koulibaly shot 4 people, all Jewish, and took the other customers hostage, threatening to kill them too if the Kouachi brothers were killed. At 5 p.m, the Kouachi brothers were killed in a hail of bullets as they stormed out of the print shop. And just a few minutes later, Koulibaly was killed in the supermarket. France's 3 days of terror were over. That Sunday, nearly 4 million people and 50 heads of state took to the streets in a march for free speech. Amid their chants, "Je suis Charlie," I am Charlie.
Emerald Maxwell with the events as they happened 10 years ago. Let's get more analysis. Yan St-Pierre joins us, analyst of terrorism and political violence, CEO of the Modern Security Consulting Group. Thanks for joining us, Yan. Pleasure to have you here on France 24. January 2015, it seems like a different world, doesn't it? Certainly the Charlie Hebdo attacks changed many things, didn't they?
Absolutely, and I think the key part of this is it was not only one attack, but it lasted over 3 days. It really sent shockwaves, and that was always the big question following the 9/11 attacks in the U.S. 14 years before. Was why is France immune to those attacks that occurred in Spain, in Great Britain? And somehow France had always been immune to it. There was even an article in Foreign Policy in 2008 that cited France as being one of the 5 worst places on earth to be a terrorist. And then suddenly this happens, and it opened the door for what is likely in the post-war period, the worst year of terrorism France has ever experienced. And yeah, so definitely a huge game changer when it comes to security and how we treat violence and terrorism in France.
You correctly point out, Yan, of course, January 2015 started with those attacks. November 2015, of course, even worse was to take place at the Bataclan de Stade de France and at several venues, cafes across that section of Paris as well, which again continues to have repercussions and effects here in France today. Do you feel, looking at it from your perspective, with your analytical view of things, France is a safer place now?
I wouldn't say that France is a safer place because the threat levels have changed over the years. Obviously, the great focus on Islamist terrorism since then has created a circumstance where it's more difficult for that terrorist fringe to act. Nonetheless, we've seen an increase in far right, far left, other types of political violence over that period, which means that while maybe one aspect was reduced slightly, others have increased as well. And therefore, this applies not only to France, but to Europe as well, is that we're dealing now with a highly polarized political situation, in which political violence has become normalized. And this is definitely, Charlie Hebdo and what happened then was certainly a precursor to what we're seeing now.
The changes abroad, certainly I'm thinking now of what's happened recently in Syria. Is there now a danger that what we see happening there will have some kind of a knock-on effect across Europe, and especially in France?
Absolutely. We've seen that with the attacks of October 7, 2023 in Israel, that there's definitely after that was, the divisions, the polarization around that war, its consequences, its development has incited people supporting IS or Al-Qaeda to perpetrate attack. What we're seeing as well is that is a change in demographics when it comes to terrorists, that we're seeing 14, 16, 18 years old now being more committed to this. So definitely headlines in the political situation worldwide, whether it's in the Middle East, in Ukraine, Central Asia, definitely has repercussions in terms of political violence in Europe.
And in terms of prevention, I mean, clearly we hear from intelligence sources of the great numbers of potential attacks that are foiled, not just each year, but each month, each week. There are numerous attacks that are sort of caught in the bud, as it were, stopped before they grow any further. What is the issue? Is it about France trying to re-educate, set out a different kind of agenda for people to follow? Is it about perhaps giving more freedom or less freedom? What's your interpretation? What would you say?
Well, I'd say it's about finding that balance. On the one hand, the political rhetoric around security, the use of fear creates a lot of problems. We're seeing that with the emergence of the far right. A lot of the topics surrounded fear. Over the holidays in the U.S., for example, the situation, the attack in front of the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas, New Orleans. We saw it before that in Germany a few days before, just before Christmas. So there's certainly a context for that, and I think whatever the means were put at the disposal of French security forces and European security forces, it's still very difficult to try to prevent that. While at the same time, I think the knowledge about terrorism, what motivates people, what creates the circumstances for it to thrive, has evolved so much that I think we're in a better position now to prevent it. Nonetheless, because there are more actors, there's a greater interest in terrorism, political violence, that sort of mitigates the impact of new resources that are unfortunately always behind what terrorists plan.
Yan St-Pierre, thanks for your analysis. We do appreciate it. Analyst of terrorism and political violence and CEO of Modern Security Consulting Group. Yan St-Pierre, thank you for joining us here in France 24.
Thank you for having me.